going on, everybody? Sean here from Afterlife Studios, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 tips that will help you improve your EQ. EQ can sometimes be a very daunting plugin. A lot of people are intimidated by it. In fact, that's probably the #1 thing I get asked about is, how do I EQ this? How do I EQ this? EQ is this huge thing, right? It's so vast, there's so much stuff going on with it, but sometimes we just got to simplify what we got going on with EQ. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make awesome records and awesome tracks, and hopefully I can be someone that helps you get to that point. Basically, there's a spectrum of frequencies. You're going to either boost or you're going to attenuate, which means lift or take down specific frequencies. Keep it simple, that's all it is. It literally is not this special magical spaceship. It is either taking up frequencies or bringing them down. That is it. If you like my content, do me a huge solid. Hit that subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell. Like this video for the algorithm. Want to give a huge shout out to everybody that's reached out to me. The support is insane, like for real. Guys, awesome. Thank you very, very much. Cameo with Jim over there. So hopefully I can give you some of the wisdom I've learned and expedite your process, because you know, all this stuff takes a long time to learn. If you can master EQ, the quality of your mixes is going to drastically improve and everything's going to sound a lot better. So with that said, let's hop into some tips and let's get you EQing better, guys. Tip #1, the mids control the mix. So easy for us to get caught up in worrying about what the low end and the high end is doing that we forget about the mids. For the vast majority of what people are going to be listening to your tracks on, the mids are going to be the most prevalent frequencies that are going to be in the track, right? So phones, big one, cars, headphones, all those things are very mid-oriented. So if you spend more time working on the mids, don't worry about anything below 200 or anything above about 12K, and you really take the time to figure out what's going on in those frequencies, your mixes are going to be drastically better, right? They're going to translate better, they're going to sound better, they're going to have more space. The mids are the unsung hero of all tracks. So the better we can get our mids, the better the whole track is going to sound. So my recommendation is spend the most amount of time working on your mids. The mids are probably the most convoluted area of an entire track. Essentially, almost everything has frequencies that sit in the mids. The mids also give you space in your mix. Notch out frequencies that will give space to all the different instruments. You will have so much more clarity in your mix. You'll have so much more power in your mix. It is literally the secret sauce to having a good mix is having good mids. Spend the time on your mids and you will see the improvement in your mixes. This is the meat and potatoes of your whole track. And it's so easy for us to get caught up in what the low end is doing that the mids get forgotten, right? In the high end, it's easy to get caught up in that as well. But if you take the time and you make sure that your mids are placed where they need to be, your track will be 100 times better than somebody that has the lows where they need to be and the highs where they need to be, but the mids are not where they should be sitting. All right, guys, tip #2, mix in mono. So it's so easy for us to put these big stereo mixes out, but you don't really know how the frequencies are interacting with each other. So when you're in mono, everything is right on top of each other. There is no separation or anything. It shows you what frequencies are clashing. Now, if they're clashing in mono, they're still clashing in stereo. Whether they're separated or together, there's still going to be phase issues. There's still going to be lots of problems there. There's going to be masking. So if you're mixing in mono, you will see a huge improvement in how your mixes translate. It'll completely take away all the muddiness out of your mix. It'll add clarity. It'll add high end, different perspective on how your mix actually sounds, especially on mixes that have lots and lots of stereo tracks. We're talking synths, we're talking guitars pan left and right, we're talking layered vocals all over the place. Then it shows you where those things are getting stacked upon, and you can just notch them out. So basically, you're creating little pockets of space for every single piece of your audio. It's a huge deal. It makes a big difference. It's so easy to forget because when you're hearing it on the monitors, it doesn't sound like they're being masked. But when it's in mono, it shows you whoa, these are stacked right on top of each other, it gives us the chance to fix it.
Alrighty, so here we have a track that has a lot of stereo components. What we're going to do is throw it into mono so that way we can see what the issues are and how we can correct those. I'm going to play it in stereo first, and then we'll go back and we'll listen to it in mono, and that way we can track down where some of the issues are happening. Okay, so the track has a lot of frequencies that are being masked. So what we're going to do is throw it into mono and see if we can get a more accurate idea of what's actually happening with this track. All right, so now that we heard the track, we heard there's a lot of buildup around 200 hertz. Um, so now that we hear this, we hear that there's a lot of buildup in the lower mids area, which is causing it to sound muddy and for the drums to lose power in that lower frequency. So had we not thrown it into mono, we would never have known that, hey, there's a lot of buildup in that lower area and it's hurting the separation of instruments.
EQing in mono is a huge benefit that it's such a simple thing, but people forget about it. It will improve your mixes dramatically. So with that, mix in mono. Mix in mono. Tip number 3, don't be afraid to push your EQ. Everyone's heard the saying, only do 3 dBs or 6 dBs on any kind of source. So as engineers, it's very easy for us to get caught up in the 3 decibels up, 3 decibels below, 6 decibels up, 6 decibels below mindset. However, if you want big and exciting mixes, you have to not look at the numbers, right? Especially on raw recorded drums. Drums are very dark sounding when they're tracked. And if you only do 3 decibels or 6 decibels, you are not going to get that professional polished drum sound that you're looking for. I'm going to hop over to the computer in a second here and I'll show you guys a couple of examples of the difference between 3, 6 decibels and where it needs to be without actually looking at the source.
Alrighty guys, so I'm going to show you guys a demonstration of how important it is to not be afraid to boost or cut hard enough in order to make something poke out of the mix or to make it sit better. I brought up the track, and what we're going to do is listen to the kick drum, and we're going to listen for what it's going to need. Alrighty, so to my ears, the kick drum is missing attack. In metal drums, you need a lot of attack on that kick drum in order to make it poke out. There's lots of heavy guitars, lots of heavy bass. So the power in the kick drum is in the top end, not in the low end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the SSL channel here. And what we're going to do is pay attention to this top band. And what we're going to do is the kick drum's attack is anywhere from 5K to 8K on metal drums. And what we're going to do is we're going to slowly boost it and boost it and boost it until it sits in the mix. So right there, it's at 3 decibels boosted. So it's making it stand out a little bit more. Let's bring it up to 6. Okay, so 6 makes it stand out even more. But now, so let's push it past that 6 to see if we can get it to sit even better in the mix. So let's bring it up to 9. So what you hear is when you're pushing it way higher. So right there, we ended up at 15 decibels, which is a lot to boost anything. But in this track, that's what it needed. It needed to be pushed that far in order to make it sit and mingle with these guitars and still be articulate in this track. So don't be afraid to boost heavily in a track. And the same thing applies to cutting. So let's bring this back to 0. Right now we're at 500 hertz. And what we're going to do is listen to this kick, and we're going to start pulling out 500 hertz until it sits right. Okay, so let's pull out 3. Still sounds kind of nasally on the kick, boxy sounding. Still sounding, so let's bring it all the way down to 12. So when I bring it down that far, it adds this articulateness to the kick, and it brings it alive. So it with raw drums, they're super, super dark sounding. So especially with raw drums, don't be afraid to EQ heavily. It is a complete game changer, and it will improve your mix.
So don't be afraid to push it harder. I mean, on vocals, it's a little bit more necessary to keep it within that 3 to 6 because people are very perceptive to the human voice, and it's easy for us to hear big EQ moves. On any other instrument, it's a lot harder for us to notice these big EQ changes, so don't be afraid to do them. Don't be afraid to push it as far as you can and then back it down if you need to, versus not pushing it far enough and then your mix sounds flat and it doesn't have any excitement in it. It's a big difference between pushing a track to the extreme limits versus keeping it tucked in and keeping it safe. So my challenge to you is definitely push yourself further and turn that knob up. Don't be afraid to turn it all the way up, and then just back it down until it sounds right, until it fits in your mix. Pushing yourself to that limit, and that can even include cutting too. If you need to cut something out, cut it out. Like, don't be afraid to cut out 15 decibels if you need to. It's not uncommon for me to cut out 15 decibels on a kick drum at 500 hertz. There's a lot of muddiness right there. I pull it out, rip it out. You don't need that. On vocals, that's probably the only exception on vocals where I'm willing to do some pretty big cuts is 500 and 800. There's boxiness and there's muddiness and there's nasaliness. Pull them down. Don't be afraid to just pull them out, pull them out, pull them out until it sounds like too much, and then bring it back up just a tad. You cannot be afraid to make these big EQ moves. You don't know unless you push it up that high or if you pull it down that low. So don't be afraid to get past the 3 to 6 decibel rule. Push it forward, push it harder, and then turn it down if you need to. Don't be afraid to go past 6 decibels when you're EQing. It'll change your mixes. Alrighty guys, so if you stayed this long, I'm gonna give you one more game-changing tip. Always EQ at the same volume. Now the key to doing this last tip is you gotta listen to a lot of music on your preferred speakers or headphones. Essentially what you're doing is you're training your ears to hear what it's supposed to sound like. And there's a reason behind this. Your ears will get quickly adjusted to whatever thing you're using to listen to music on, and then when you're doing your own mixes, what'll happen is it'll immediately poke out. You'll hear it quickly, and what it'll do is it'll give you the ability to better EQ. You'll be like, wow, I hear that. That is not supposed to be there. And then you can use the LDFC method to go find it and fix it. So always use the same volume, never change the volume. I almost never, ever, ever touch my volume knobs on either my headphones or on my speakers. It has improved the way I mix drastically, and this tip, I haven't really seen it anywhere. It's all about training your ears and finding ways to hack your ears, because the faster your ears can tell you something's wrong is the faster you can fix it. And unless you have these kind of checks and balances in place, it becomes difficult. So let's say if you're starting low in the mix and then you're listening to it and make it sound good there and you turn it up, there's no reference point. So for this system to work, you have to leave it at the same volume. It's why the car test is so effective, because you get so used to hearing what it sounds like in your car that you can immediately hear the issues. The car is not the best way to listen to music by any means, but because you're used to hearing it that way, you can find issues. And that's, as engineers and as artists that are producing ourselves, we're trying to get rid of these issues to make your track sound a lot more polished and a lot tighter. So always, 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 always listen to music at the same volume on your headphones and on your speakers. Do not touch that volume knob. Get accustomed to how it sounds, and you will mix faster, more efficiently, and better by always having it on the same volume. Alrighty guys, well hopefully this video was super helpful for everybody. I didn't want to just give you a whole bunch of numbers on how to mix. I wanted to give you techniques, right? To be able to improve what you're doing without being so caught up in numbers. Numbers don't do anything. What we need to do is learn the techniques in order to improve our mixes, and hopefully these tips can help you do that. It took me a long time to understand EQ, and it took me a long time to get comfortable making decisions with EQ, but these tips are the things that genuinely help me, and I hope that they genuinely help you. With that being said, if you like my content, hit that subscribe button. That pushes my content out to a lot more people, and it helps share these tips, and hopefully this video can actually help somebody push forward, or maybe it was the missing link that they needed. And when you guys share the videos and like the videos and subscribe, it spreads out the word, and it might be a game changer for somebody, and I'm really hoping that's what happens. And with that being said, stay humble, stay hungry, something else inspirational. Peace out.